Hello and welcome to Upstage Downstage.
With me, Richard Platt, seated in the upper circle.
And me, Stephen Rees, seated in a cheap seat. This is the Theatre Podcast, where we discuss productions we've seen, things we've liked and may not have liked, giving our complete unprofessional and non-biased opinions.
So grab a brew, take a seat and let's raise that curtain.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing The Rise and Fall of Little Voice. We saw this touring production at Derby Theatre on the 5th and 6th of May 2022. This play by Jim Cartwright had its first production at the Royal National Theatre in 1992. It explores the highs and the lows of small town dreams. So Richard, what's it all about?
Mari Hoff and LV are mother and daughter who are central to this northern fairy tale. Though far from being close, left to her own devices, Little Voice embodies famous divas as she repeatedly plays her father's vinyl records, from Judy Garland to Shirley Bassey, ultimately getting her talent spotted by her mother's latest fling, Ray, who thrusts her into the limelight where she finally finds her own voice.
So with all that said, let's set the scene. So this is going to be an interesting play because we saw this on different days, didn't we?
Yeah, I saw it on the
Thursday, was it?
Thursday, and
so I must have seen it on the Friday then.
Yeah.
What's your first impressions of the whole set and the layout? Would you like to describe it for our listening viewers?
Yeah, I think when you walked into the theatre, you were presented with a house on stage that was your typical 2 up, 2 down terraced house that had been cut away with, basically you could just see almost like the walls had been taken out so you could see the whole entire rooms. You can see the kitchen, the front room, LV's bedroom, and the only thing you couldn't see was the room off, which would be Mari Hoff's bedroom, and also the utility room just off the stage. There was a street light.
I quite liked the set. I've seen something similar when I went to see, I think it was Alan Bennett's Enjoy. They did something like half the house. I think it was a little bit of a house. But anyway, I've seen something similar. So this was quite a nice set to see.
Yeah, it was a very static set, but what you also saw was there was a lot of character built into the actual set. So yes, it was a house. Yes, it was a cutaway, so you could actually see each room. But it looked lived in. It looked like every room was used, and it was a little run down, a little tired around the edges. You could tell that LV's bedroom was her bedroom, with all the pictures of all the stars that she sort of followed, which we'll talk about later in the podcast. But basically, you could see that you could instantly familiarise yourself with a typical northern house.
Yeah. Do you think the set was used very well?
Yeah, I think every inch of the set was used. It may not have helped that it was quite so far back on the stage. It did feel like a little bit disjointed from the audience in the distance. I do know that's because of all the set pieces that he used in it, but it
was that because of Mr. Boo's
Boo's stage came in front of it, yeah. So, but I do think that may not have helped because it did feel a little disconnected with its audience because it was quite a way back.
Yes, I suppose now you say that, it probably does look a fraction on the small side, considering the width of the stage.
Yeah, you can definitely tell it was made to fit on all stages, as it's a touring production.
Oh, definitely.
So it would quite easily fit anywhere with ease.
How many times have you seen this show before?
I've seen it once before with a different cast. It's quite a while ago now. And it wasn't the same touring production. It was a different touring production because some of the things that they did were different. And that was done in a very similar way. I do remember the set being closer to the stage, but I think the set was built really well.
I've never seen this show before, so I was green coming into this, wondering what I was going to see. Well, I'll talk about the overall effect when we move on to the writing.
People that are familiar with the film Little Voice, this set felt very close to the house that you see on the film, so it's very well referenced as the very similar makeup where everything's in a very similar place, so you sort of familiarise yourself with that setup.
Yeah, I suppose, but they're very typical houses, aren't they? Let's face it, we all know them. I refer to them not as terrace houses but Coronation Street houses, because and
they're still very much used now.
They're
still there. They're still even though this is sort of set in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, you know that this is the same sort of layout of most houses in those terrace rows, in those Coronation Street houses. So it instantly transports you to almost a cramped, confined way of living, that everything has a purpose, everything in the rooms need to be used. There's no space for luxury or...
But we all also know the type of person that lives in those houses.
Yeah,
you know they're not going to be well off.
No, they're going to be on a basic wage and
down to earth.
Yeah. They spend a lot of time with their neighbours. There's a lot of interaction on the street, so you know that everybody sort of almost knows everybody.
I was going to move on to the writing, but actually, let's just discuss the scene changes.
Yeah, the scene changes. Basically, in the first half, there wasn't really any sort of obvious scene changes. There was parts where they brought a piece of sort of wheeled scaffolding out, and that really was probably the only screen change in the first half. The second half, the production turned into Mr. Boo's Working Man's Club, and that happened in the interval after the safety curtain had come down. They dropped in Mr. Boo's in front of the house. This is why we're talking about the house being quite a distance from stage. This was a big scene change in front of that house.
And then throughout, the tabs came up, and then we went back into the house.
Yes.
And it just went from the house to Mr. Booth again.
Yeah, it didn't. It literally had a simple scene change. I mean, one of the things I would say about the set is I do think that the black areas of the stage were used really well, as when a character or a cast member walked off, they disappeared. And I find that's a really technical thing that not everybody gets that right. When you leave those sides of stage, you do tend to disappear, and I think they made that happen really well. So there's a scene to stage right where they walked off into another room that isn't there, but you'd never saw the character go off stage. You just thought they'd just gone to that other room, and I thought that was really well utilised.
Where I was sat in D4, probably the other side.
Yeah.
I actually could see them walk off the set with another hand lifting up the curtain.
Yeah.
Whereas
I was central stage, so
you didn't get to see it, but I just think productions where I've seen like a stage hand lift the curtain so they can all like.
I just think there was one moment where they walked off behind the street light into the sort of round the back of the house almost. And they disappeared, and I think that helped. I mean, walking off stage into the street scene, I suppose you can forgive them because they got black tabs, and there's not much more you can do in that situation. And they didn't really leave stage that much.
You just know that they're walking off.
Yeah,
really.
You know they're going somewhere else.
Yeah, but they kept in character while they walked off.
They did. Yeah.
It's.
We've seen it done worse on other productions, so this is this was done well.
Yeah. Now we can come to the writing.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's a good writer?
Yes, I think Jim Cartwright is a good writer.
Yeah, he's done a lot of good ones. He's known for Road, Bed, 2 that I know of. Have you seen any other of his plays?
I haven't personally. No, I've not seen. Just looking at the list, I haven't seen any of them.
So coming to this production, I heard a lot about the rise and fall of Little Voice. I knew Jane Horrocks had been in it, and Alison Steadman, and in the film Brenda Blethyn and Michael Caine. Yeah. However, I was led to believe it was more of a musical, a more intricate, grand piece of theatre.
Yeah.
So I felt at the end of it, I felt a little let down because I thought, oh, is that it?
Yeah.
I like the way the characters interacted with each other and were developed, and the actual point of Little Voice, and the fact that she'd lost a father, had a little voice, but played these records, and she imitated all those brilliant divas out there.
Almost as her friends in her own domain. It was her comfort blanket. It was her way of
dealing with the loss, dealing with the loss and everything. And I really thought it was quite impressive when the part where the house was burning, she just kept listening to the records, and oh no, it wasn't that. It was when Ray entered in to get her, and she was just going from one character to another, one diva to another, saying, impersonating these people in sort of a frenzy before she left.
Yeah, it was a way to not let go and to hold on to that comfort, that link to her father that she couldn't let go of, and that was cleverly. I mean,
it was cleverly performed.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the film numerous times, so I do know this production quite well. I've seen it before on stage, and they did well at recreating the film. And I'll talk about my other thoughts on that later.
Yeah. However, the overall writing of it, I felt a little lackluster. Maybe for the day, it was
Yeah,
great, or maybe it's probably because I expected something more, and I didn't get that because it was overhyped.
yeah.
Maybe.
I think
Maybe
I
that's the
sort
issue.
of I knew what to expect in the sense
Yeah.
of I knew that they were trying to be faithful to the production and the actual script itself, because it is more of a drama than it is a musical.
Yeah.
And the music is part of it. It's still integral to, but it's not actually.
Well, it's down to the character,
It's
isn't
down.
it?
It's a character performance rather than a musical or singing or
Yeah.
dancing. It's actually quite a small cast.
Yeah.
The production is itself. You know, it's.
But I can see the story structure
Yeah.
of it from A to B to C and D and everything. So I appreciate that, and I did like it for that. It's extremely good.
So, Stephen, what you're probably saying is, do you think it's of its time, or do you think it's become a little outdated now?
Possibly because, mind you can always go back and watch period
Yeah.
dramas and stuff.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
this is clearly a period thing because they were having the
Yeah.
telephone lines connected,
Yeah.
which was a big thing in the 80s.
But do you think
it'll be
it-
earlier than that?
But do you think it maybe stands up to the test of time, and does it have its classic status, or does it just feel?
I think it's got a classic status because now we've got X Factor.
Yeah.
Well, we did have. I don't know if it's still on. We've got Britain's Got Talent.
Yeah.
You've got influencers now doing their own thing on Instagram. You don't necessarily need terrestrial TV. Well, you don't need to go on them to do your thing.
No, of course not.
Because no one, younger generations aren't necessarily watching those programs.
No,
It's,
they're not finding
watch what they want.
their
It's
favourite
YouTube.
stars through that anymore.
Well, exactly. It's all Instagram and build your audience from there. So the talent scouts and the little working men's clubs are just a bygone era now. So it is of its time, and it is a period piece now,
Yeah,
and a classic production
yeah,
for a classic era
yeah,
of
definitely.
time. Yeah. Now let's talk about the direction. This play was directed by Brian Lagan. So do you feel the direction was on point, Richard?
Having seen the film numerous times, I felt that the director only used the film as their reference point.
Oh, right, okay.
So I felt like it was a carbon copy of the film rather than a new take on the script, which I felt would have been better if they'd actually used the script and almost, yes, still had a reference of the film, but gave the characters their own personality because it's a stage performance. So I do feel there was too many. I'm not asking for deviations off the script, but I sort of want to see characters developed with a little bit of personality rather than a copycat performance.
I think I know what you're saying, or trying
Yeah.
to say. I think they would have worked from the script.
I think they would have worked from the script, but what I do think is they'd watched the film a lot and imitated the argument scenes, the scenes where, even down to Shobna Gulati's performance, was very blend of breath in.
I was going to say, is it down to the acting then, or the direction?
But then the director should rein it in if it is getting to become too copycat of the performance. So,
Right.
so for me, it's that they are at the helm, so they've got to make sure that it has its own style and its own personality. And I do think there was, yes, those words were used in the film, but and I think this is where the disconnect came from me a little, is because of that almost imitation of a film rather than actually. I think there was a few moments where you think it didn't feel as relaxed as maybe it could have been if they could have had fun with the script. I think that's where I went. There was a few
do you
moments.
think there was all on edge?
Yeah,
trying
I
to
think
get
there
it
was
right,
all on
or
edge trying to sort of make sure that it was perfect, and then but you've got to mess it up a little bit. I don't mean lose the lines or this, that, and the other, but you've got to have fun with the words to actually enjoy yourself doing that production. And I think that's where it maybe let itself down a little bit in the directing.
Do you feel this is a little bit disappointing for you then?
Yeah, at times. I think because it was too close to the film, as in, I know it's the script, and I know this, and I know that it's meant to.
So I've not seen the film,
Yeah.
so I've no idea.
But yeah, for me, I just think that it was very close to the original sort of directing rather than a director putting their own stamp on it. I don't feel like it was a newly sort of created piece.
Okay.
Whereas I've seen other productions where they've taken the same script and they've not changed it dramatically, but you feel like you're watching a refreshed version of something, you know.
Oh, I thought it was well directed for what it was. I'm a bit confused about the fact that there's a partition wall between the lounge and the kitchen.
Yeah.
And they used the actual doorway which was there.
But they didn't use the doorway all the time.
No, they went around the other side.
Yeah,
of
it
the
was.
wall,
It
which,
was like,
I mean, I'm supposed to
you'd have been
imagine
better
that's
off
a
just
wall.
having a double door open, double door with
Yeah.
no just complete partition.
Yeah, so not even have that thing. Maybe
Yeah.
they had to keep it there for structural reasons, for
Yeah,
part of the set.
Yeah, but it did feel strange walking
It
through the door,
felt-
but then walking through the wall.
Yeah, felt a bit odd, strange, weird,
Unusual.
unusual. Also, I do feel that they used every inch of the set.
Yes.
They came up to the TV area when they were in the room.
Yeah.
But I have a sneaking suspicion that they even went outside of the house whilst technically being inside. I think they went on to the black bit.
There's
I can't remember
actually
what...
a jutting bit of black stage at the front in front of the house that hadn't got any carpet on it, but it was used as part of the room, and it blurred the line a little between the sort of the house scene and the rest of the stage.
I mean, I don't mind that.
It wasn't too much.
It wasn't an issue, really. I'm just trying to think back if my memory serves me well, and I'm not quite sure, but I have a feeling that they did breach the set.
Yeah, they did. There was a couple of moments.
Yeah, but other than that,
I think directing wise and movement from entries and exit points and things like that, they were done really well, and it was fast paced, and people needed to move quick. The cast had to move quick to be in the next scene, or I think it was directed well where scene to scene there wasn't really much lag. People were in their places when they needed to be, and it carried on with a good pace.
yeah, there was nothing spectacular about it, and that's not in any way to put a downer on this play at all. Even like for the director, it just was what it was.
Yeah.
Really, you know, which is fine, which is good.
Yeah.
Now, moving on now. Do you know what we're here for? We're
Here for the drama.
So, Richard, let's discuss the performances. The good, the bad, the ugly. Do you want to start or shall I?
You start.
Oh, God. Okay, so I have previously said I've never seen this before. And the first character you see is Mary Hoff, played by Shabna Gulati. Now, I'm familiar with her with being in Dinner Ladies as Anita and then Coronation Street. And I've actually seen her live in Dinner Ladies, funnily enough. And I'm sure I've seen her somewhere else do something else. Oh, it was Doctor Who. But anyway, I know what she's like, her acting ability. And when I saw her come through the door and she was playing this character, I felt amazed that she could bring this tart with a heart in a way.
Yeah.
But it was just really nice to see her play that character so well.
It
that
was such
really
a
impressed
detachment
me.
from her
usual
other roles that she's normally
Yeah, because
done.
she normally does get, unfortunately, typecast. But to see it in this, especially when I didn't know what kind of character it was, I thought she did really well, extremely well, actually. And boy, does she have a lot to learn. All that dialogue.
For Mari's character, there is so much to learn.
Yeah.
You're pretty much on stage for the whole thing.
Yeah.
There's not really a moment where you're not there with something to say. And comic timing is needed.
And she has got comic timing because, you know, she is quite a funny person.
And to be honest, she didn't hold back.
No, she didn't. Oh, when she was doing the slutty scenes and
Yeah.
bumping and grinding and riding on the back of the sofa.
There was no moments where she hesitated or she didn't want to.
You can tell she relished this character. She
did.
really
She
enjoyed
really did.
playing this.
Yeah, she really enjoyed, and
She didn't hold back.
She stayed in character throughout as well.
Absolutely. Oh, this is on the side. In the scene where she's coming to get the ironing board out. Now, she gets out of this utility pantry thing, and they've got these... the nets, they're bamboo nets, aren't they?
Yeah, bead curtains.
Bead curtains of the time, they are. Well, it gets caught up in the ironing board, doesn't it, when she's trying to come in? Now, it didn't happen on your...
It didn't happen on my night, no.
And so it happened on mine where it got caught up and she couldn't get out. And then she had to improvise and she called out for Sadie to come and sort her out and fix this. But then because she did that, improvising, then Sadie, Fiona Mulvaney, she comes out and she says, okay. So she took it off her and untangled it and they carried on the scene.
Yeah.
But it I love. This is why I love live theatre,
Yeah.
because you get to see things that
Something
go
gets
wrong
thrown
or
in the way
something-
and they have to deal
Yeah.
with it. You can't.
And they
you can't
stay in
leave it.
character.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
even Fiona being Sadie, she just loved being in her character as well. She
Yeah.
had very little to say, like LV.
Yes.
You knew it was Mari that had the big voice
Yeah,
overshadowing all both of
Yeah.
them, really.
And Sadie's that comic, as we've touched on in Barry Humphries with
Like a
Madge.
comic relief,
It's the
yes.
same sort of character where they don't say a lot, but every time they do,
They're
they
the comedian's
do funny
prop,
thing. They
aren't
are.
they?
They
Yeah.
are. But also there was moments with Sadie where she did the ridiculous and the messy, that eating the green cornflakes and things like that.
Throwing
where-
up.
And throwing up.
Holding the spew and-
But even the throwing up was
Yeah.
on time.
Oh, that
To
was
the
well
point
done,
where
yeah.
she knew what to do to get that, to drag it out just enough to be funny and grotesque as well. And it
Yeah,
was, you know,
yeah.
it's just brilliant.
And hats off to Fiona Mulvaney, because she actually plays Mari as the understudy as well.
Yeah.
So to know that role as well,
Yeah.
with all that dialogue,
Yeah, it's
and
crazy. It would have been interesting
I,
to see
I
her
would
in
have
that,
loved
to
to
be
have
fair.
seen that.
Yeah,
side
just to
by
see what
Well, not
happened.
necessarily side by side, but
No.
to see how her spin on it would have been.
Yeah, definitely.
Because if that's her character as Sadie, it would have been really interesting to see how she gets really brash and even more slutty and
Yeah, just to go
loud.
from that to that, just
Yeah.
such a change in character.
Yes, and for the part of Little Voice, Christina Bianco, you know of her. Well,
I've-
you don't know of her.
No, I don't
You-
know her.
you
I'd
know
like,
what
it'd be great to know her, but I know of her in.
in other things.
Well, I've seen her live twice in Edinburgh,
Yeah.
as in her own sort of stand-up comedy music show, really, where she sings and imitates
Yeah.
other performers. So she does everything from Barbara Streisand to Julie Andrews to Britney Spears to Lady Gaga to Shakira.
Brilliant.
So, and she does Judy Garland. She does all those characters in her repertoire. As she was found in a club in New York. So she's an American performer. She was found in a club in New York, just doing one of these club sort of very jazz bar type performances where the audience used to just shout different stars out. There's actually YouTube videos out there showing this. So I had confidence that she could play the LV character, so I knew that was going to happen, and I personally wanted to see how she would perform as LV.
It's a difficult one to actually judge because I don't know her from Adam, to be honest. I just don't know her. And when she had stage time, she managed to act, but obviously she never really said anything or did anything. So it was only her voice that I can comment on, really. But I know going from one diva to another, she just did it impeccably. I have a feeling she did impersonate Cilla Black, but I don't know if there was that Liverpool twang on that in particular one. But what you only really hear of her when she comes into her own in the second act, once she's sung and done different voices.
Because you hear snippets in the first half, but you don't actually see her perform until the second half.
Yeah.
And I will come back to a little comment on this where she was imitating Jane Horrocks a lot in this performance. And that was my comment with the sort of directing and the performance. Her Yorkshire voice and her Yorkshire accent was very Jane Horrocks, not a Yorkshire voice or her own version of that voice. And that's where I just felt like if they'd have just worked a little harder on finding LV's voice for this performance rather than Jane Horrocks from the film.
Right,
And
yeah,
that's
so her own LV
her
voice.
own LV voice. And I think this is where I'm going with it. It's more, that's my comment on the directing. It felt more like a carbon copy of LV from the film rather than an LV.
Yeah, what
know.
about Shobna then? Do you think she was...
I think there was a lot of times where she was very Brenda Blethyn, and it was a Brenda Blethyn Yorkshire voice rather than than Shobna's, and I think that's where I felt the disconnect. It was only because I'd seen the film quite a lot of times, and it just felt very. There was some of the crappity home things, the scenes where she was talking, some of the voices she used, and some of the intonation in the voice and the way she said some of the jokes were almost precisely the same as what was in the film. And I think that's why I just thought they could have maybe played with it a little bit more to give it their own take on that voice, that character, really.
I just interjecting here. All I got from that particular character was not Shobna's performance, but that character that it was Alison Steadman.
Yeah.
I could actually picture Alison Steadman.
Yeah, on stage.
On stage, actually being that character.
Yeah, definitely.
What play did she do? Oh, it was Abigail's Party.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not necessarily as bitchy like that, but,
No, but
she's
in the
got
same
that
sort of way,
range,
yeah.
you know, so it didn't surprise me.
I mean, moving back to Christina Bianco, there's no doubt she knows how to perform on stage. She proves herself every time. She can quite happily. She's so tiny, but she can stand there and stand up against everybody else and still perform. And for somebody who is American to be a convincing Yorkshire-speaking girl, it was very. She did it really well.
But do you think she was overshadowed?
But then I think maybe. But however, this is a production where she is overshadowed. All the time. That is the whole point of the production.
I know that, but
yeah, I'm just thinking. And
when she sings out,
Yeah.
as Alvy, is that the thing you think about when you think of Little Voice?
it is, but I do think they.
Because I've come away thinking more about Shobna and that character.
Yeah.
I think more about that character than the one that just sang.
Totally. I mean, the thing is, for me, there was a few moments where I didn't feel the set helped when there was no build up to Little Voice's second performance, where it's meant to be an all expenses big performance, the last night she's ever going to perform, and it did feel just the same as the first performance because the set didn't change for Mr. Booze. Whereas in the film, it's a grander, bigger performance for the second performance. And the previous production I saw quite a while ago did have that difference, and it did make it feel more grand and more of a performance. So that might have helped it, rather than you feeling like a retake of the previous performance she gave. So,
what about the other performers? Because we've not even touched upon the men.
We've not talked about Ian Kelsey.
No.
And, I think he did a
Akshay
good job of being Ray Say, which in the film was played by Michael Caine. So I think it's a big.
You need to stop referencing that film.
I know.
I thought Ian gave good energy.
Yeah,
I mean, they all did really.
They were all had high energy. Yeah, throughout the whole thing, they didn't stop.
No, but I think it was one of those characters where there's nothing much to them.
No, it's to
Does that
say
make
what
sense?
you see. It's a sort of
the type of character it is.
You just
out for
know
themselves.
you know who they are and what they're there for. That's they're very much.
And the good bit of detail about this was he was pretty much had no money in a little bit, but once he got LV on stage, his character changed a little bit because he then drove up onto the set. You didn't see a car, obviously, but he didn't walk. He had the car. He had a different a posture suit on, and he had like a cigar on, and he had a bit more bling.
Yeah,
I think he had probably more gel in his hair as well. But he just looked a bit more suave and sophisticated, just making the money out of LV, you know. Right, was there any standout performances? For me, I thought the standout performances was Shobna Gulati as Mary.
Yeah.
Simply because she had a lot to say. She was very energetic.
Yeah.
As soon as she came backwards through the back door, she was on it.
Yeah.
Constantly on the go. She kept at one note, I suppose, a little too much. Very high pitched, but I suppose that's down to the writing as.
Yeah, I mean, the character,
down to the writing, but
almost the character of Mari is about
almost
ignoring the fact that there's real life things happening. She's distracting herself by staying in this conscious level that is above making a decision about life or noticing that there's things wrong with her daughter and doesn't want to admit that. So by distracting herself, by becoming this other persona, it's completely sort of almost ignoring that and brushing it aside all the time. And that's what Shobna did well, because that it almost comes across as not caring and not thoughtful and not thinking about anybody else in the world. Almost the way she treats her best friend as well. You know, it's all about her, because it's easier to deal with her than it is to deal with real life and things that she's caused or she's been involved in, that's seen things go downhill.
Well, she takes them off for granted, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. When I say one note, I don't mean that in disrespect to her performance.
No, not at all.
I suppose that's more the character and what was required from it.
Yeah.
And when there were those smaller moments of intimate or quieter scenes, then she did actually she went there.
Yeah, eventually,
you know.
she did show that. And there were certain moments that actually show her break her cover almost. And that's, you're almost playing two parts as well.
Yeah,
You know?
which is why for me she was a standout actor. Sadie was a brilliant part, and Fiona played her brilliantly.
Yeah, she did. Really did.
But that character and her performance was standout for a different reason.
Yeah.
Not because of she stood out for being memorable.
Yeah. She
for
was
that character.
She was always the character on stage. Facial expressions said a lot. The way she reacted to the put downs that Mari gave her, and those moments.
She was very grilling. Wasn't she?
But there was sort of really harsh put downs, but almost like she's besotted with her friend, so she takes them. But then it does get to the point eventually where she does actually almost get her own back, but in her own way, you know. So it's sort of.
And we did have two other guys. We had James Robert Moore, who were playing the part of the phone man. There were other actors playing these minor roles as well, and they weren't standoffish. They weren't memorable.
No.
And in fact, I can't really remember them other than they did minor roles. So I can't really talk much about them. Well, I have nothing to say, basically.
No, I think LV's love interest was just that, and it's almost a mirrored character. Ashke, who played Billy, was how Billy should be portrayed. It's almost a mirror image of LV, almost a side-by-side parallel of somebody that's equally as quiet. So it's hard to stand out in that performance when you've got very limited lines. So
that character wasn't really fleshed out.
No, there was no. I didn't feel like they'd worked enough on that character. Yeah, and I felt there's a little bit of awkwardness sometimes.
But I don't think it was down to the acting
no.
as well. I think it was probably equally just the fact that it was underwritten.
Yes, there's not a lot.
And that's not me throwing shade, by the way.
No,
not throwing shade at all. If that character's not really vital or pivotal to the plot, then why invest a lot of detail and stuff?
Yeah, I think you got no background until right at the end, where you sort of they built him up a little bit, but it didn't. He didn't hang around. He wasn't around as much as maybe he should have been, and
perhaps it was just there for LV to talk to or interact with, because she wasn't really interacting with anybody else.
Her journey out of her life. He was her journey.
Another journey.
It was another journey.
Oh, who would have thought
Who would have thought it'd be a journey?
Well, I'm just going to grab a biscuit and dunk it in my tea whilst you carry on talking about your little journey.
I think Billy is the almost changing point for LV to become the person she really is and have a little bit more confidence and a little bit more of her own strength. It's the push. It's that catalyst that
gives her confidence,
unwinds her issues with her father, and that she can have a life on her own without always looking backwards. It's that.
Yeah.
That's where the Billy character comes in, really.
Yeah. Now, what did you think about the costumes and the props?
I think the costumes were of the time. They were of the period, so it really set that. It made you feel like you were back in the sort of late 80s, early 90s. It was very much in that era. So, it's hard to comment too much because there were sort of very pedestrian type costumes for that era. So, yeah, there was the odd flashy dress on the odd sort of sparkle, but it was done in a way where it was almost like it had been bought from a charity shop and it had been cleaned, which would have happened. You know, they would have reused and recycled a lot of the dresses and things like that. They wouldn't always have bought new. So I think it did the work well. It was done well.
Yeah, nothing spectacular.
No.
Just what it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. It felt
Just
right for the piece.
What about props?
I think they used everything that you could see around the stage. To be fair, there was a couple of moments where a couple of the props may have been a little bit questionable as to the age of the props, as in there was a moment where Billy brought out some security lights that were
Oh, yeah.
LED rechargeable ones circa 2022 that would not have been available
Yeah.
in the 90s.
Yeah. Nope.
They just wouldn't have happened, and he referenced them as security lights, and there was no cables, no wires, no nothing. And it would have been better if they'd have bought some old-fashioned torches with big batteries in them, the old sort of 9-volt heavy torches that would have given the same impression, but it would have felt right. Yeah, so there was a few moments where those props were maybe a little bit of a misstep. I mean, the ironing board that was brought out was very modern day as well. It wasn't an old asbestos style original hand-me-down ironing board. It was a very new one. So, but that nothing major.
See,
really.
that never occurred to me that it was out of place. I noticed the security lights, but I mean, as I said, when they brought the ironing board out, it got caught up in the beads. So.
Yeah, you want it was tangled up anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I thought the use of the phone, and when that was being installed,
and
the
a proper
comedy over there.
That was a proper BT phone. It was the proper you know.
Yeah,
one
Maury
for the time.
Linkman was probably on the other side.
He probably was. Yeah.
You know. Now, what I quite like was whilst the action was going on between Mari and I think it was Ray at the time downstairs, Sadie was upstairs looking after LV while she wasn't very well, and I thought it was quite funny the fact that she just ate her sandwiches.
Yeah, definitely.
I got a chuckle at me. And mind you, I mean, it's a funny play.
Yeah,
but I think I'm probably scraping at the barrel for a bit of information on the props.
Yeah,
there.
I mean, the one I suppose the good mention is the props that we used in LV's room. All the records and the vinyls were the right covers. They must have sourced them from and spent time finding all the right vinyls for the production, so they were referenced a lot, and there was good placement of props where the vinyls were placed in the right place for parts of the script as well, and I think that was useful.
Well, in the second act, when they get thrown out the window,
Yes.
spoilers.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, the amount of just the audience reaction to that is like,
Yeah.
ooh,
Throwing all them out the
sacrilege.
window.
Like, how dare they?
Break vinyl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because obviously vinyl's come back now.
Yeah, no,
in a
exactly.
huge way. So probably all the collectors are in the audience, and it's like, no, those poor vinyls.
I know. I mean, obviously,
there they are, gone.
I don't think they were truly breaking the records. If they were
No,
probably,
it's just cardboard in the sleeves. That's all it is.
Yeah, it was probably some of the John Denver albums that have been sat around in a charity shop.
Denver. Yeah.
I
Shirley
mean,
Bassey. Moving on to our final segment.
What the tack is this?
We're in your domain now. The lighting, the sound, and the effects, and all that, and everything in between. Go on then. Whilst I have a sup of my tea, chat about it.
one of the moments I noticed that is a little bit almost prop related as well as technical is Billy builds a big lighting show for the finale of the production, and the lighting controller he has in his hand hasn't got a cable that connects to the lighting stand, which intimates to me that it's a remote control lighting controller, something that didn't exist in the late 80s and 90s.
So we're going on time.
It was a little bit similar to some of the other moments where you think, this is a little strange. And also, the lighting controller was sat on the actual lights themselves, and he picked it up and then put it back on there, which means he could have just had a simple cable attached to it to then put back where it was. So it just gave the idea that he'd wired it all up himself, whereas actually he just held a box that it just felt a bit strange.
But if you think about it, if they have in their mind modernised this, okay, why would you have your phone line being connected still?
Well, true.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And even if he did talent scout for LV and get her onto the stage, it wouldn't be decorated in that because that is very still 80s.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
very old hat. So we've got
it's such a weird disjointed time. It's like those. It's only like the security lights. Those are the things they're the references that you don't have. You don't have. Those moments aren't things that happens.
Well, I thought the lighting and the sound effects were pretty good, to be
Yeah.
honest. Well, actually, to lie, the sound effects, not the sound effects, but the sound where they play music upstairs, but then
Yes.
it goes to a din,
Yes.
or even when they've got the record playing downstairs.
Yes.
There just seemed to have been something. I mean,
There
I
was-
saw
there
it
was
on
a-
different
there was-
nights.
yeah,
so
but
it was a bit odd how it cut from one to the other.
Yeah, and I felt that also when they put the record player on, sometimes you could hardly hear it, so you couldn't really
Particularly at
tell
the
what was
beginning,
on.
it was-
Yeah, you couldn't
Yeah,
actually.
but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It seemed really like
it was quiet. It was quiet to the point where
they probably had a DJ mixing it.
Yeah, but it felt like what was the point? Because if you couldn't hear it, it just didn't
Yeah.
make any sense. When actually it was meant to be a battle between the mum and the daughter playing their music, and it was meant to almost be a confusion of sound.
Well, they got
But
it
you-
all right.
but
I
you
was a bit
couldn't-
confused.
But you couldn't hear it well enough to hear the difference sometimes. And
So it wasn't deliberate, then?
no, it
was
should
just a
have been.
mess.
It should have been more deliberate than it was, I think.
Yeah, I suppose.
I mean, lighting wise, it was really well done.
Well, I question
And-
the lighting. I mean, why would you have a lamp where the light looks into the house, like going over the pavement? Surely it should be the other way, so it lights
Yeah.
up the road.
Yeah, I agree with that one. It should have been the opposite way round.
I mean,
to
that is. I am
show
right.
that. Yeah,
I'm thinking
you are.
that,
Yeah,
aren't I?
because it should. In a way, we're missing a curb on the
Well,
set.
exactly. We are.
We're not actually showing that we're next to a road, because every terrace road would have a road next to it.
Yeah.
And if they'd have built a curb, maybe, I mean, it would have been a trip hazard, but it would have added more. It would have shown realism. You know, I do question the what was meant to be a scaffold that was brought out to the window.
Yeah.
That to me didn't look like something that you would use to do the repairs on a roof. It didn't look strong enough or safe enough. It looked like one gust of wind and it fell to pieces.
Yeah, it was one of them in a warehouse.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
it was
wheel in to
warehouse
get-
ladder rather than
Yeah,
it was
pretty much.
than something to use outside. And I think that
Yeah, could you just get a ladder and just go?
it felt more. Yeah, it's either a ladder or a cherry picker on the back of a van
Yeah.
or something that
Yeah.
would have had more. Would have looked better than what they used, because when they brought it out for a second time, it just came to the same position. And when Billy said, "I've just been round the corner from somewhere else," and you're thinking you've wheeled that all the way
Well,
from
exactly
somewhere
that.
else, it was
I
like,
wouldn't have bothered.
It just was wrong, you
I mean,
know.
how desperate is he
I know.
that he has to wheel that around
On
the
tiny
streets,
little
on
wheels.
tiny little wheels?
Yeah.
Come to perv on a little girl.
And normally
Well,
this
on a little
cobbled
woman.
cobbled street, so it's been a right mess to
Oh,
try and
right,
get.
hoo-ha,
Yeah,
that.
would have.
And you're saying that no policeman would have said, "Hey up, mister, what are you
Exactly.
doing late at night with them bloody steps?"
And before we talk about the fire scene, which we are going to, while we're still on this ladder that goes up to the window, the sound effects and the
For the smashing of the window.
smashing the window.
The window was open.
The window was
there was
open.
no glass there.
There was no glass in it, but also the night I seen it, I don't know about Stephen's night, but Billy put the hammer through the window before the glass smashed. So he was waving the hammer round the window, and then the glass started to smash in the sound effects, and it was like there was such a disconnect. It just don't do it. You know, it's easier not to.
Yeah, I think he did the same thing when I saw it.
It just felt lackluster to breaking a window when there's no glass in it, and
But I'm sure they'd already opened the window because of the sash window.
because they were talking.
previously, yes.
Yeah.
So it just didn't add up to me.
No, it didn't add up to me.
Right, Richard, when they had the fire scene, I just want to pose this question to you.
How did they do that?
Okay, so this isn't really a spoiler, because if you've seen the film,
That film again?
Well,
We're talking about the film again?
I am going to talk about the film because,
Have you only ever seen one film in your life?
yeah, just the one. It's called Little Voice. There is a scene at the end where the house catches fire because they have electrical faults. One thing I will say before we start talking about this scene is they did the electrical effects in the first half well, because it did feel like there was an electrical fault when they flashed on stage and the kettle
electric
blew
shocks.
up almost, and those little things happened. That
It's
felt
the foreshadowing
right.
of what's
Yeah.
coming, what's to come.
So the consumer unit basically explodes and the house catches fire.
And what I will say, it also,
Yeah,
jabbing in here, for it to have a fire now without anything being referenced to,
yeah.
it would have been...
It wouldn't have made any sense.
No.
It would have felt.
Be one of them Deo Machina things.
Yeah,
where,
definitely.
it just accidentally
It's just
happened without
happened.
you planting the seed that
Yeah.
this is how it could happen.
Yeah, exactly. So what happens because of the electrical fault, the gas fire then catches fire, and that becomes the fuel source for the fire. Basically, you see a lot of smoke building from under the.
Hold on a minute. Actually, if it was gas, wouldn't it have been more of an explosion?
Maybe, but it seemed
But
the way they did
they
a
wouldn't have been
build
able to
rather
do it
than
on
a.
obviously.
It was almost like they wouldn't be able to do it on stage, but I think they were
I was
trying
expecting
to.
the whole audience to be engulfed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Smoke.
it was really done well because they hid smoke machines under the kitchen units, and
Yeah.
the smoke came billowing up slow. There was a
There
real
was a
slow
gradual
build,
build-up, wasn't there?
and there was coloured lights hidden under the kitchen units where basically it was showing an orange glow and a yellow glow and white glow of fire just permeating through the smoke, which
Okay.
for me that made it feel more. I've talked about fire in other things where we've
Have
talked
you?
about Sheila's Island, where we talked about making fire and smoke not being timed.
Oh, of course,
and
yes.
it sort of not having was not being
How
timed right.
How forgettable is
Yeah,
that?
exactly. I
I've
mean,
forgotten about it already.
but I think we talked about how timing is everything for fire, and they got it right in this one because the fire just felt like it was building, and the smoke got bigger and bigger and bigger, where the whole room was engulfed while LV was locked in her room, and it did feel like the whole place, because
that's it. Dramatically, she
you
was acting
always say
against
there's
that.
no smoke without fire, and it's always going to be the smoke that builds up and engulfs, and then the fire comes, and then it gets bigger and bigger, and then it becomes overwhelming. And I think they did that really well.
Yeah, and whilst that was going on, she was going into a frenzy, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was
going
trapped
through
in
the
the room.
divas.
I mean, one thing I will say is I do think this is a directing thing, but I think it was a little bit awkward because in the film version, I'm going to say that.
Oh, again?
Yeah, maybe.
Here we go again. Back into the film. Maybe we should actually view the film and review it
And as we watch it, yeah,
as a
so-
special,
special
one-off
episode.
episode.
But in the
film
film,
reviews.
there is a scene where Race breaks down at Mr. Boo's singing a song while the fire happens at the same time, and there's almost a dramatic sort of build up of
So you're talking
fire
about intercutting.
It's an intercutting into between
Of
the
scenes,
two
yeah.
scenes, and
to build up the dramatic
to build up
tension and
to
everything,
make you
yeah.
feel almost more emotional about the fact
Yeah.
that this house is on fire. They've got somebody else losing their mind. It creates more of a dramatic effect, whereas this production did those two elements separately. So it almost felt like, so we've done this and then we need to do this.
Yeah.
Rather than doing it all at once to create that, because at the end of the day, it's the end of the production, and you got you need a build to then become bigger and bigger and bigger, and it just felt like
It flatlined.
it did, it really did. It
You were
felt
more
like they threw
interested
it
in-
away.
Yeah, you're more interested in about what's going on in the house,
Yeah,
and then it just.
I mean, I
I
know
would
why
say
they
cut, but that's a film
yeah.
reference.
But
They
they
didn't cut,
they,
it just went to.
they bought
the
Mr.
tab
Boo's
came down.
tab in front of
Yeah.
that house catching on fire, and I could see why they did it, but it didn't feel right.
This is why I think perhaps with it being placed in the stage, and we already discussed the setting of the stage and the fact that it was a little bit probably too small for the stage, but had they have had Mr. Boo's section to one side,
Yeah, exactly.
then they could have interplayed
Yeah.
those scenes.
Yeah, and they could have
had
lit
the
it in a way
build-up.
that we could have,
and
done it in
just
that
done
way.
something with the lighting.
Because there was room on stage, because there would have been room to move the house to one side of the stage to have more of it was big enough.
Imagine if they had that house where it was on a round table, so they spun it.
And a revolve.
So
Yeah.
whilst it was revolving round, you had it turn
Yeah.
to Mr. Boo's.
Yeah, and you
thing.
progressively saw it get more engulfed in fire as it's turning almost.
Yeah,
And I mean, the other reason Mr. Boo's the screen came down was so that they could then distress the set more before the actual final scene where they walk back into the house afterwards, after it had been after the fire engine had been and watered everything down and everything was wet
I
and
expected
destroyed.
more soot.
Yes. One thing I would say is where the fuel source was and where the fire was, the behind the cooker was black.
Yeah,
They changed the cooker for a completely blackened, charred mess, and the melted TV and this, that, and the other. But the wall was still the same, Now, in every sort of
And
kitchen fire,
that settee would have gone up in flames.
Yeah,
and I
it
know
would.
they covered it.
they covered it with black sheeting, but
But it wouldn't have structurally been.
But up the
there,
walls,
right.
every fire that you see on when they show you chip pan fires or fires, those sort of things, there's always soot all the way up the walls. And they could have, above the cooker, they could have just had a fake panel of wallpaper hiding that soot screen, and they
Yeah.
could have just took that ply panel off, and it would have already been there. It would have still been a quick change, but it would have created so much more believable sort of fire distress. And
They could have done that with just like a tarnished cloth, like a sheet or something.
yeah, exactly. Just something to show that.
Because even if it was peeling off, you wouldn't know that it was a bed sheet or whatever.
Exactly.
It would just be like a
They
peeling
could have even
wallpaper
stuck some
ceiling
bits
or-
of wallpaper
Yeah.
burnt on it, so it
Yeah.
created that thing. I think one thing to do mention is because the set was distressed anyway.
I think
the
you were
rest of
distressed.
it, it was. I'm in this dress. Because the set was set in such a way that it was tired and it was dirty. When they lit everything in really low, dark, dull light, it did look almost burnt for the rest of the room. I think there was just bits
You're describing
missing.
my house.
Yeah, well, I think there was just moments where they just could have done a bit more on certain certain burn marks that would have helped a lot.
Was there anything on your night slightly different, or did anything go wrong? Because when I saw it on the Friday,
Yeah,
the part where the part where Ray Say is singing and he's having that.
Yeah,
I don't know if it built up to the mental breakdown. He hasn't done it yet, but he's having that singing.
Yeah.
that song.
basically he's lost everything, and he's making it very obvious that he's had to now step in for Little Voice who doesn't turn up.
Yeah, but there was one particular song where he's singing his heart out, but he stops, and one of the audience members carries on singing.
Really?
Yeah, and
That didn't happen on my night.
No, he didn't particularly find that quite appealing.
It didn't go down as well. as it
No,
should have
but
done.
he basically said, she'll finish it. And then he just put his two fingers up to her, and then they walked off. Walked off in character.
Yeah.
But it's one of them things where in live shows, things like that do happen.
Yeah, of course they do. You
know,
have to accept that, and it's. I mean, I suppose he can acknowledge it because he's performing to that room. So
Exactly.
he had broke the wall because the room then becomes Mr. Boo's Working Men's Club. So
Yeah.
that's the only point
Well, that's
where
exactly
you could do
why
that.
we were sort
Yeah.
of in the audience, because
Yeah.
the warm-up person was woman's up
Yeah.
for it in the play.
Yeah, in the play.
You know,
Yeah.
wasn't one of the ushers.
No, I mean, my only comment on Mr. Boo's Working Man's Club setting is I did find it very odd that none of the cast apart from Mr. Boo were in the room when LV was singing or Ray, because in the film,
Oh, the film.
Sadie and Maury,
I'm going to have to
And-
watch this film.
Sadie and Maury and Billy are all in the room, even when Ray Say has his breakdown.
Right.
So I felt that there's moments where
Let me pull you up on this one now. So you've seen the film.
yeah.
You think they've copied the film. They've
Yeah.
taken their influences from the
Yeah.
film. Right, okay. So they've copied the film,
Yeah,
and you think they shouldn't have done. So when they do something they shouldn't have done, you're saying, why didn't they
I
copy
think
the film?
what I mean is
Riddle me this.
riddle me this, riddle me that.
Get out of that one, please, Batman.
I think what I felt was when it went to Mr. Boo's scene and the warm-up act came out, the crowd weren't as receptive as maybe they'd have hoped. If there was other
Are
people
you talking about in the film or in
no,
the stage?
in the stage version, I felt like the audience weren't as receptive as maybe it could have been if there was other people in the audience to give them a little bit of oomph or allow them to feel that you could cheer along. I felt that there was still a disconnect
Right.
because Mr. Boo didn't have the war. He sort of I felt like the audience still felt like they were watching a production rather than becoming that audience.
I see what you're saying.
You see what I mean? It
Yeah,
was like
yeah.
even if they were stood at the side or just there to cheer on LV.
Do you think it
just
would have helped
felt
if
a bit-
Mr. Boo came through
Yes,
the audience?
it would have.
And
Yeah,
picked on people.
Yes. I think there was a bit missed where it still didn't cross the fourth wall enough
Yeah.
to
So it needed
to
more
welcome
audience
people in to
yeah.
join in almost.
More
I think they
audience
just
participation
expected
and
them to
integration.
join in, and it didn't, because I felt like Mr. Boo, as yes, he can deliver his lines, but he has almost the flexibility to go off script to bring that audience,
Yeah.
to allow that audience
I
to
could
join
actually
in.
see that working,
Yeah.
especially if he would have been like a comedian
Yeah,
in his
he's
own
that.
right.
Yeah, he would,
you know,
and that's because he does that every night.
yeah, exactly.
He welcomes
So he
everybody.
could have gone into the audience and just picked on a couple.
Yeah.
Not to extend the play too
and
much,
but it would have
bring them into
and it would have helped with, say, a little bit more time for a set change behind scene, or a little bit of this. It would have given them a little bit of breathing space to
put the soot in the kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but and I think that would have made it feel a little bit more like it was an event.
But saying that, I could have watched that. I
Yeah.
probably would have had anxiety if he did pick on the audience. And
Yeah.
if he did wonder if he's going to pick on me. But then, if I'd have saw that, I might have just marked it down for padding as well.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. I
maybe
just
just
think
can't win.
I just think it felt a bit awkward when LV shut down and there was no running after her to see if she was all right. Everybody, all you saw was a go off stage.
Yeah.
And you didn't know what had happened when you think, well, there was people there supporting her, so how do you...
Yeah.
And I think that might have helped Billy's character, because Billy was there every night and he talked about that right at the end,
Yeah.
but you never saw Billy almost idolise her
Yeah.
at that point. It was like you only heard it right at the end of the production, and that maybe gave him less of a character, because he, you know, it's not always about the words, it's just about being there in the room to show the support, and I think that may be a bit of an issue.
How did this show end? I'm asking you because I can't remember now. I know
The show ends.
Someone was singing.
The show ends in at first the first ending almost is LV's retribution, LV's getting her own back to her mother and actually talking to her, because all the way through the production you've seen her,
the breakdown.
you see
That's
her
where the
actually you see
vinyls.
LV actually, so the vinyls get thrown out the window. Basically,
That-
Mari throws.
That's symbolic
It's
of
a
her voice breaking.
Yes, it is. It's part of that. It's the trigger then for LV to say all the things to her mum that she's never told her throughout her life, and have the confidence to do that. So that's that, and it's a really quite powerful scene because it's the first time you hear her. And one thing I do like about and after that scene, then Billy does his light show and invites LV to sing, but he asks her in this version to sing in her own voice. Now, that wasn't done in the previous production I've seen, and I thought this was probably the most touching moment for the production, because LV sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow with a Yorkshire accent, and Christina Bianco did an amazing job of creating that, because it wasn't done in the film. Mention the film again.
Really?
It wasn't done in the film, and it was a touching moment where it gave that moment to LV to have her own voice and sing it in her own voice, not anybody else's impression, not falling back on anybody else's, not falling back on any of the greats that she's been imitating. She's just her. She's just herself, and I think that was a really nice moment.
That's the whole point of the play. She discovers her voice.
Yeah, I think it added more strength to the script than maybe it would have done beforehand if they did. You know, it was a nice touch.
Are you trying to say now that this ending of the stage production is better than the film?
I think it would have added more to the film if they'd have done something in that way.
Clutch my pearls.
I don't know if it was maybe discussed, because I've not seen the actual script, but it wouldn't surprise me if maybe they toyed with it, but maybe they just
Which
edited.
script? The stage script or the film
Well,
script?
I mean, yeah, probably the film script. I don't know, because
I'm surprised you haven't got the film script.
I haven't, no.
Now for our ratings, as we say.
Call this a show.
So Richard, what's your final thoughts for The Rise and Fall of Little Voice?
My final thoughts are that it was well put together in some ways. However, it felt dated as a script, and it wasn't the film. However, it was trying to be the film, and I think that may have scuppered it in being a great piece of theatre for a wider audience, because I felt like it was almost resting on the laurels of the actual film,
Fair
rather than being its own performance and
Yeah.
production.
Okay, and on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being somewhere over the rainbow, or 1 being ding dong, the witch is dead. What's your score?
I would give this a 6.
Oh, okay. So for me to sum up, this was an entertaining show. I've obviously not seen it before, and it was all right, but it was only all right. There were some standout performances, but again, it didn't really live up to its expectations for me, so I don't particularly want to come and see this again. No offence. And my score is equally a 6 as well.
So, what sound effect will you be choosing from the following? A complete train wreck? Tumbleweed? An audible shrug of the shoulders? A slow clap? A pleasant applause? Or a standing ovation? What will it be?
So Richard, what's it going to be?
I would just give this a pleasant applause because I think they worked hard. I mean, Christina was good and I didn't expect anything less. So yeah, it's a pleasant applause for me.
Yep, snap. A pleasant applause as well. I thought Shobna Galati was excellent.
And in the words of Sadie, I think this was okay.
So there we are. That's our discussion of The Rise and Fall of Little Voice. We hope you found it insightful.
If not, entertaining.
Coming up over the next few episodes, we will be discussing the new production of Boeing Boeing
Blood Brothers
and Fascinating Aida on the road again. That's it for this week, folks.
If you'd like to drop us a message, please email us at upstagedowstagepod@gmail.com. Remember, you can always join in the chat to share with us your views on a production.
Also, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you get every episode the second it's released. And we hope you join us again for another instalment of Upstage Downstage.